going live, and I think we can get started.
Sounds good.
Okay, so welcome everyone to this SalesLab virtual tour. So it's the first Ask Me Anything with Megan Bowen. So Megan, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. It's great to be here.
How are you doing?
I'm doing great today. I'm excited to answer some questions and to chat with some people. So looking forward to the session today.
Exactly. That's actually the first time we're doing this format with the Ask Me Anything. I mean, on my end, I know you're very used to that. So that's why I thought also it would be a good thing.
Yeah.
And also you have I've watched a bunch of your videos, listened to a bunch of your podcasts, and you have like really interesting thoughts. You're also working with Chris at Refine Labs. And so I think you are into a very kind of hot space with really nice ideas. So I wanted to make sure the audience was able to kind of directly access and talk with you. But before we jump in, can you maybe tell us more about yourself? Who are you? And yeah.
Absolutely. Well, I grew up in Southern California, but I moved to New York when I was 19. I've been here ever since. And I've spent the last 15 years of my career working in B2B SaaS companies based in New York City. Have really had a great time growing up in the New York startup scene. I started my career as an account manager at an education technology company. And really, that's where I learned everything about account management and customer success. Everything from implementation to onboarding, retention, renewal, upsell, and really fell in love with that discipline and that function. After that company, I went to a small startup called ZocDoc. And ultimately built out their post-sale team. It was early days there, and that was my first experience building a team, and I loved it. And from there, I went to Grubhub Seamless, online food delivery tool, working for their B2B division, not their consumer division, and similarly built out their account management function. After that, I went to a company called Managed by Q. Started as the head of account management, but eventually became the chief operating officer at Managed by Q. Took over sales, marketing, account management, and operations. That was my first opportunity to really run all go-to-market teams as a COO. We exited to WeWork, which was exciting until it wasn't, and a little bit of drama there, but it was a great exit. And, some of those things were out of our control, and a great experience to be a part of.
Yeah.
And after that, I got back into the food space, went to Platters, another B2B food company. That said, once the coronavirus happened, that business was severely impacted as people are no longer in offices and ordering lunch. So ultimately moved on from there, and most recently joined Chris Walker at Refine Labs as the Chief Customer Officer, COO as well. I manage internal company operations, our customer experience and customer success, and partnering with Chris to grow the business. So I've just celebrated my 3-month anniversary, and it's been amazing so far. Really excited to continue doing good work there.
Yeah. That's crazy because I had the impression you were there for years. The thing is, I think Refine Labs is what, 1.5 years or old, or it's pretty.
Not quite. Yeah, about 1.5 years, 18 months.
But you're just like crushing it so much that I'm like, okay, this is a huge agency and they've been there forever. And Megan is I've been there like crushing it forever. And I'm like, no, just 3 months. I was like, yeah, that's pretty fast.
For that, things are going really well. Yeah, our business is growing fast. We're working with some really amazing companies, and so we're very optimistic about the future.
Yeah, that's great, and you're doing something really different. So I think it's really nice. And so ZocDoc, you know Justin Welch, right? You've been working with him.
Yes, I worked with Justin, and I worked at ZocDoc at the same time. Also very friendly with his wife Jen, who also worked at ZocDoc. We're still good friends and keep in touch. Actually, I have Justin to thank a little bit. I think he had mentioned to Chris too that we had worked together, and ultimately Chris and I ended up connecting on LinkedIn a while ago, and that's how we first got connected and ultimately worked into joining forces at Refine Labs.
That's crazy. I mean, it's such a small world. Actually,
it is.
And Justin is really. I invited him on the show once, and was also super insightful. So yeah, really like following what he's doing.
Yes, he's amazing, and he started his own consulting business that's going really, really well. Wonderful person and great business owner.
Yeah. Exactly. Okay, good. So let's jump in the questions. So, to everyone, basically, you can go and drop your questions in the comments, either on YouTube or on Zoom. Really like questions, we can talk about a ton of things, but we have like demand gen, lead generation, sales, customer success, revenue, pretty much everything around revenue. Just drop your questions. We have a few already there. I'm going to start with the first one, which
All
is,
right.
what is the difference between demand gen and lead gen?
That's a good question. There is a pretty big difference actually. And so the way I like to define lead gen versus demand gen, when you take lead gen, essentially what you're doing is typically you're using various performance marketing campaigns to collect contact information. And so whether you are putting a gated ebook on LinkedIn and people need to, give you their email address in order for them to get the ebook, that is considered, in my opinion, a lead gen campaign. Oftentimes, those email addresses will be sent over to an SDR team and they'll be put into some type of, cold calling or email sequence to attempt to convert that person to a meeting. More often than not, when you're just collecting people's contact information, sure, you can consider it a lead, but often they're not necessarily ready to buy. And so lead gen efforts typically can result in a lot of email addresses, but usually not in a lot of revenue.
Okay.
So when you look at demand gen, the definition of demand is to create buying intent in a person that wants to buy your product or service, whatever it is. So what I think the key difference is you running for example, a campaign on Facebook to educate and provide awareness of your product and service to a potential buyer. And then they actually come inbound to your website and they fill out a form asking for a demo. That's
Okay.
demand gen, because you have a buyer coming to your website. They have high buying intent. They're raising their hand. They want to talk to a salesperson to learn more, to decide if they're actually going to proceed with buying your product. So I think the key difference is lead gen is like collecting contact information, and demand gen is actually creating buying intent in your target
Okay.
buyer. That's the
Okay.
key difference in my view.
Okay, that's really interesting. I never thought it this way because one thing, like for me, is often I find like I'm doing a lot of lead gen and trying to go to demand gen. Now I know that's the best thing to do,
Mm-hmm.
but like often we are afraid, of putting all our content out there and not being able to attribute that first to our efforts. That's one thing in marketing that is very common, the attribution. And often we're just like, like, what's my guarantee that if I put this content out there, I'm going to get some intent coming back? And often we kind of feel more reassured collecting leads because we can see some result coming out of it. We can count the leads we do whenever demand gen is harder. So how do you, like, what would be your tip on how to switch to demand gen without being too afraid?
Absolutely. So I completely empathize with the fear around that. But I think the important thing to remember is what metric actually matters. And for most businesses, that's revenue.
Mhm.
I think a lot of people get caught up in the attribution trap and feel like they need to attribute every single dollar that comes into the company to some particular effort. And the reality is if you're doing demand marketing and brand marketing effectively, you're creating awareness and buying intent in the market. And you might not ever know exactly what the thing was that
Mhm.
made that person come to you and say, I'm interested in buying your product. But if you're able to effectively grow revenue and continue to generate an inbound stream of high intent buyers, you're ultimately creating the business outcomes that you want. So I think sometimes people can get caught up in measuring things that don't really matter
Mhm.
and don't translate to business results. The challenge is a lot of performance marketing or lead gen efforts do create a short-term return, right?
Mhm.
Like you can do something and get a bunch of email addresses and then contact all those people, right?
Yeah.
When you think about demand gen, it's certainly a little bit more of a long game. It's a longer play. You really need to invest in superior content marketing to help build your brand and drive that awareness and education. You need to make sure that you're meeting your buyers where they are so that they're consuming that information and seeing that information. And then you need to make it really easy for them to find you when they're ready to buy, and make that sales process buyer-centric and seamless, so they're excited to move forward and work with you. So I think that the sooner that you make the mindset shift, that it's less about measuring exactly where that lead came from and more about focusing on the activities that are going to drive revenue and happy long-term customers, you will see those benefits, but it will take a little bit of time. And so I think it's I guess sort of to summarize, I think not getting caught up in attribution or metrics that don't really matter is key. Focusing on the long game and educating and providing awareness to drive that inbound demand is really the key to long-term success. And the sooner that you're able to make that shift and change your activities to focus more on demand versus leads, the sooner that you're going to see the positive results within your business.
Okay. Yeah, it makes a lot of sense actually. It's often, it's this thing where you say, okay, I want an immediate result short term, and then you have to actually just see the long game. And often it's crazy because in B2B, like people in most companies, you see the what they do, like the ebooks, the sponsored ebooks they put on LinkedIn or whatever, and you're like, what is that? They like, what are they doing? It's really hard to understand. So it's really interesting. So we have other question. We have one here. Having experience from entry level to executive customer facing positions across organizations of various sizes, for a startup where the same few people are handling all customer facing duties early on, what would be the key indicators or benchmarks they should watch for that to tell, I guess, them it's time to start splitting into dedicated customer facing roles / divisions?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I'm assuming they're thinking through some of the distinctions between, for example, like a customer support function versus a customer success function and or an account management function. And so, yes, I think my time at ZocDoc, I think, was really interesting because I joined at a period where we just had a really large customer support team and they did everything. They handled all of the reactive work with, people emailing and calling and chatting in. They also handled a lot of proactive work, for, new doctors that were on the site and reaching out to make sure that profiles were updated and appointment times were populated and all of those things. And it just became a catch-all team. And we would just hire and hire and hire more and more support people. And everyone was doing all of the work. And it got to a point when the business started to scale to a certain size that no longer became effective and efficient. And so I will say that, in an early stage startup, that's often the case. And often that's fine up until a certain point. What I would say is when you begin to see either significant increase in the ability to resolve your inbound issues, when you start to see an increase in churn from your customers, when you start to see a degradation of the customer experience because there's too much volume and things aren't being handled as well as they could be, that's when you need to start to assess when to make that change. Additionally, when you have a person that's responsible for both proactive and reactive work, that's very stressful for an internal team member to do those things well. So that's another indicator when you're seeing your internal team struggling to stay on top of everything, because there isn't focus and, sort of differentiated roles to support that focus. So those are some signals to look out for. And ultimately, the way I typically like to structure teams in later stage organizations is to separate the reactive and the proactive work. So you have a dedicated customer support team that's responsible for all reactive work, email, phone, and chat. And they're optimized for being able to handle those reactive tasks within an appropriate amount of time, whatever your SLAs are. And then you have a separate team, which is typically a customer success team or an account management team, and they're focused on all of the proactive activities to ensure customers are onboarded properly, that they get the support that they need for ongoing retention and upsell and renewal. And so I think that typically is how my experience and how I like to structure customer facing teams through that reactive versus proactive lens.
That's really nice. I really like that also because it's often, I've seen many founders, they raise a bunch of money and then they're like, okay, we're going to put role specialization like crazy. And then they hire way too many people and there's nothing happening. And then that's just the worst. And basically you have the other way where you just make it happen, then it breaks and it's kind of like, oh, you have first signs of it breaking and then it's like time to change, to have this role specialization. So I think I always I prefer doing this approach where you do things until it breaks. It's not really, it's a bit stressful, but yeah, that's also a good thing. I really like your glass. Is it like Hulk or?
Oh. Yes, it is.
Okay, that's amazing.
My husband works for Marvel, so we're a Marvel household.
Great. Yeah. So we have a question here from Abby. Who says, thanks Abby for your question. So I work at a SaaS company in the life sciences industry. How do we convince our marketing team to post content on LinkedIn that is actually educational and creates demand? Good question.
It's a great question. So, I think there's a couple of ways I would go about it. I think one is making sure that your marketing team is aware and understands the current opportunity that exists on LinkedIn. Right now, LinkedIn is in the top 20 most visited sites in the world. There are 750 million users on the platform. Less than 4 million of those users post content once a week. And it's actually completely free to post content organically to LinkedIn through your personal or your company page. So the opportunity to spread your message and to position, your company or, an ambassador of your company as a thought leader in whatever space you're in, life sciences or otherwise, it's just a tremendous opportunity to take advantage of. I would say the next 12 to 36 months is probably the most opportune time to, the best time to get started on LinkedIn was yesterday, but the next best time is today. At some point it might not be free anymore to post content, right? So I think number one is break down those numbers for them and show them the type of organic reach that they'll be able to achieve if they dedicate time to this particular channel. And then I think the next thing is, oftentimes people like to see that something is working before they're willing to dedicate more time and resources to it. And so if you're at a particular company, maybe begin posting yourself and posting information that you know about and that your customers want to know about, and begin to build your brand to drive awareness and engagement, and then show them what you're doing and what that's creating. I think that those are two ways to open their eyes to the possibility. And also, if there's other content that they've created, show them how they can leverage, the efforts that they've already made and repurpose that content, through LinkedIn posts. So those are some initial suggestions to get started that hopefully will do the trick for you.
Yeah. For me, I really like this. The one thing I suggest often is whenever let's say you have like an ebook you asked to kind of put there so people download it. What you can do is summarize the ebook. Or what I found is like you're gonna get in trouble with the marketing team. Maybe you should do that. But what you do, you download the ebook yourself, then you summarize it and you put a post about that and you say, if you want the ebook, let me know. I'll send it to you directly by direct message. Yeah. So when you do that, you kind of bypass the lead magnet stuff. You're going to get maybe in trouble, but if your company is rather small, maybe that can work, and you're going to get the lead coming to you. And if there's a discovery or a meeting that's there, it's going to be yours. So that can be something you can try. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I think it's all about providing valuable information without necessarily asking for anything in return as well. I think, at Refine Labs, we do no outbound selling. 100% of our customers come to us because they've heard about us. They know about Chris, about me. They've heard the podcast. They see posts on LinkedIn, and they're interested in finding out if we can help. And when we speak with them, we're not trying to convince them to work with us. We're trying to find out if they would be a good fit for us to be partners and work together to help them grow their business. And so it requires a shift in mindset when you think about how can I give value on this platform, so that people view me as an expert in my space. When they need help, they will come to you. It really works. People are skeptical, and it can take a little bit of time. But like with most, real sustainable business growth, that takes time, and dedicating yourself to doing it the right way is how I would recommend going about it.
Okay. You said something about podcast, which is good. We had a question about that, which is, should I start a podcast? What's the ROI?
Yeah, so I'm a big believer in podcasts, especially right now, especially with the pandemic, and there's no real end in sight. It's a really amazing channel to spread your message. And additionally, if you invest in creating a video podcast, you're creating a repository of really rich content that you can then repurpose elsewhere. So for example, like our strategy at Refine Labs, we have, Chris has his podcast, The State of Demand Gen. Every Tuesday night, we host a live AMA session called Demand Gen Live, where we have, 50, 60 people show up every week. They ask questions, me and Chris answer them. We record that whole AMA, and that is an episode on the podcast. And then that's how we will take short clips from that episode, and then we will post those short clips on LinkedIn. And then we will link to the podcast episode within the comments of our LinkedIn post, right? And so the podcast becomes a way to create rich content on a regular basis. And then that can fuel your content strategy through LinkedIn as well. Also, it's how you can, clarify your message and get your message out there. You're talking about the things that you're an expert on, the things that you do, the things that your company does. It's a form of brand and demand marketing in and of itself. The key is the content needs to be high quality. You need to figure out how you can distribute that content to the right people. LinkedIn is a great way to do it as long as you've invested in making connections with the people that matter to you and your company, potential customers, prospective partners, investors, whomever it may be. But once you've laid that foundation, it's a really, really strong content channel right now. And people love listening to podcasts and watching videos. It's a way people like to consume content that way today. So you're meeting your buyer where they want to be and giving them content in a way that they want to consume it, versus a long form case study or blog post. Those can still be good, to be clear. Those are still good pillars of a content strategy. But by far right now, podcasts are hot. Lots of people are creating them, but it's not saturated by any means. And if you make the commitment to creating high quality podcast episodes, I think the ROI is really strong. We get new customers that come to us that say, I heard you on this podcast, and you said something that really resonated with me, and I think that maybe we should work together. So it's hard to get very specific about the exact ROI, but it absolutely will build your brand, your company brand. It will influence new customer acquisition. And it will also help your existing customers and help retain and grow your existing customer base. So there are no downsides, in my opinion. That said, it is a commitment of time and effort, because it's not easy to get a really high quality podcast stood up.
It's a big thing for me. I have we started our podcast on beginning of the year with 38 episodes. Strong commitment, but something really important you said is like one tip I would give of people, like first, like the results are, as you said, you have people coming to you, and often what's great is like you post your content, your videos, your voice, and everything, and people build relationship with you without you being aware of that. And then they come
Yeah.
to you and they're like, oh, so nice to talk to you, blah, blah, blah. And they feel like they know you. So it's very
Yes.
easy then to kind of like have a conversation. And but another a thing that is really important, as you said, I think is to recycle content. A podcast should not be you can do something audio only, but as you said, maybe you do a recording, you do a live like we're doing, then a YouTube video, then you take like extract, and then you recycle that into an audio. And you can even
Exactly.
use a thing called Descript, which is like it's a free app, and then there's freemium, but that will take your podcast and transcript it basically, and it works really well actually in English. And then you can do like your long form kind of a blog post. But
Hmm.
that's something I didn't understand at the beginning. I was doing my podcast, shooting some videos for LinkedIn, and then like doing some other events. And then I was like, oh, maybe I could do everything at once and kind of
Yes.
multiply and reduce the work. And so I think it's a really great strategy, as you said, maybe in demand gen, because you can't really attribute too much, but you really create a lot of brand awareness with that.
Absolutely. And it's a lot of fun. I'm launching my own podcast actually on Monday the 9th, the Unwritten Playbook, which I'm really excited about. And it's like even just what we're doing right now. It's really fun, it's enjoyable, you get to meet really great people. So it's a wonderful like creative outlet as well. So it is a lot of work, but it is a lot of fun. It's very
Yeah,
rewarding.
yeah, exactly. So we have other questions here. Let me check. Is there a question you actually you're burning to answer on the things here?
I think we can get to all of them. There weren't too
Yeah,
many that were submitted. I don't know if you're getting a lot more submitted live, but let's keep cranking through them.
yeah.
Let's try to get to all of them.
Okay. So what are best practices around Facebook ads for business?
Yeah, great question. So Facebook is a key part of our strategy at Refine Labs for demand generation. It's interesting because a lot of B2B companies that we speak with, many times the initial reaction is, "Oh, we don't do anything on Facebook. That's a personal network. It's not really for business, right?" People are skeptical, like, "Why would we do that? Is that going to really drive the business results that we want?" That said, given our unique approach to how we use paid social, we believe it is a extremely powerful channel for B2B companies. And we use it in a very different way. Most B2B companies that run Facebook advertising will typically put up some type of either creative product ad or a short form piece of content. And the call to action is buy now, request a demo, contact sales. And the reality is when people are consuming information on Facebook, they're not usually in buy mode. They're in information gathering mode. They're just looking for information. And so we use social and we use it for education and for awareness, not for direct conversion. And so we will similarly use either creative product ads or other short form content, but our calls to action are always learn more. And the
Okay.
learn more takes them back to a blog post, a case study, a product page on your website, a solutions page on your website. We're not asking for their contact information. We're not forcing them to fill out a form. We're simply meeting them where they're at and allowing them to learn about the product or the service. Through our Facebook advertising, we see all of our clients will see an increase in inbound organic traffic to their website and an increase in inbound demo requests. The other couple things to keep in mind is a lot of people don't like to use Facebook because it's difficult natively in the platform to target the right people. There's a great company and tool that we use. It's Metadata.io. They have a feature within their product called Meta Match, which allows us to create like LinkedIn caliber audiences on Facebook. So it allows us to have high confidence in our targeting, that the content that we're putting out is actually getting in front of the people that you want it to get in front of. And Facebook advertising costs it's like a tenth of the cost of LinkedIn. It's much more economical. LinkedIn advertising can be quite expensive, and people like to advertise on LinkedIn because they feel confidence that they're getting their content in front of their buyer. But if you use that tool and that approach on social, on Facebook, you can get to your right buyer, you can educate and inform them. And then when they're ready to buy, they'll come to you and raise their hand. So that's how we think about Facebook, and that's how we execute against that strategy.
That's really cool. I dropped the link to the website. Do you have any kind of educational content you could share about that, so we can drive some leads to some demand, let's say, to your website?
Yeah, I mean, we have, if you go to our State of Demand Gen podcast, we have a whole episode on running Facebook ads, and Chris Walker breaks down what I just described in an insane amount of detail of like how to actually use the ad platform. So check out the State of Demand Gen podcast and look for the Facebook episode, and you can get like basically the whole playbook of what we do.
Perfect. That's what I'm gonna listen next. This is amazing, because often it's like people say, oh, Facebook, people are not on Facebook, like buyers are not on Facebook. They actually, as you said, they are.
Yep,
It's
everyone's
just
on
like,
Facebook.
They are. So, and this thing with metadata is really nice, because all the audiences are really tough to nail on Facebook, and I think it's pretty cool. So I shared everything. Go check the podcast. We have a question here. So, pointers for creating an elevator pitch for cold calls that grabs your prospect's attention enough to get them engaged.
Yeah, cold calling. So I would say a couple of things here. I think that, because we have a strong perspective around, demand and brand marketing, if you do that right, you really are able to minimize the amount of cold calling that you need to do if you're able to build that organic inbound demand in the market. So that's usually always our recommended approach. That said, I understand that a lot of sales teams are cold calling and are not necessarily going to stop cold calling. And so I think actually the person, I don't know if you know of Justin Michael. He is like the cold calling king, in my opinion. Check out his content on LinkedIn. And he has a ton of different communities that he's a part of as well. But his sort of biggest cold calling tips are always around, not being afraid to call high level decision makers, C-suite or VP level, jumping right in and adding compelling value, or identifying a critical pain point that they have, sharing social proof that you can solve that pain point. And finding out when you can speak to them again. And so I think, knowing that you have very short time, it's not really about crafting your elevator pitch. It's about identifying who you want to call, doing your research to understand what matters to them, and framing the conversation around validating that they have a particular pain point, and having a compelling few sentences of why you can help them solve that pain point. So I think don't spend time crafting the perfect elevator pitch. Spend time researching your prospect or your buyer, and find out how you can communicate your message to them in a way that matters to them. So I hope that's helpful.
That's for me, that's really helpful. The thing is, whenever I can't really talk about marketing, but in sales, cold outreach, it's about making people realize that you understand their business problem. And often it's like, or what they're going through. And talking about problems is much better than talking about what you're doing, or because often people are just gonna like, they're gonna discard you for the fact of pitching, even if your pitch is great. But if you talk about a problem they have and you tease their interest about how you can potentially solve it, they're gonna answer and be way more receptive. So I think that's often about that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So I am mostly focused on generating outbound leads. Do you have any quick tip on how to start an inbound campaign? So inbound for outbound dummies, we could say.
Yeah. So, I think there's a few ways to drive inbound. So obviously you can do it through paid media. We talked a little bit about Facebook already. And so whether it's Facebook or LinkedIn or Instagram, any paid social platform, taking the approach that I was describing of educating and informing with a call to action to learn more is the right way to go about it. Facebook is way more inexpensive. So if you're just starting out, using that platform first is a good way to get your feet wet and give it a try without spending, too much money, investing too much. If you want to leverage paid search, like Google Ads, the way that we think about that is, I like to say that at any given point in time, only 1% of your market is actually ready to buy your product or service today. Mm-hmm. The other 99% of your target market, they may or may not be ready to buy in the future. But that 1% that is ready to buy and looking for a solution like yours often are going to go to Google. And they're going to type in a search term, whatever it is related to your product or service. And very often we'll add something like pricing or demo or platform or some other qualifier that really indicates that they have high intent. And so you can spend a lot of money on Google and not get a lot of good leads that come through. So our approach with Google is focusing on high intent, long tail keywords that are capturing that 1% of people that are looking to buy your product right now. So if you're thinking about paid campaigns to drive inbound, that's how we think about Google. It's how we think about social. And focusing on those strategies will drive inbound leads to you. Mm-hmm. And then additionally, what we were speaking about before, investing your time in posting on LinkedIn or starting a podcast. By getting your content and your message out to the market, that's how people become aware of you. And that's how people will come to you when they're interested to learn more or ready to buy.
Okay. That's really cool, because I've tried personally Google Ads without success. It was a while ago, but I was like going on stuff like sales training, sales coaching, which is like, forget it.
Spend a lot of money for not a lot of return.
Yeah. But everyone will go to Sandler, Challenger, and John Barrows and everything before, landing on my page in page 49 or whatever. So it's it's crazy. So I had a question about it, but I completely forgot about it. No worries. I'll get it after. We have other questions here. So do you have suggestions to ask a customer for a case study?
Yeah, good question. So typically, I like to make sure that whenever you're going to engage a customer and ask them either for a case study or a testimonial or a review, that customer should be a very happy customer. And so the prerequisite is always make sure that you're focusing on delivering a great customer experience, not only through your marketing and your sales process, but even more importantly, your onboarding process and how they'll continue to engage with your company from there on out. Once you know that you have delivered value to their customer, that they're receiving, the business outcomes that they were hoping to receive by working with you, directly asking for a case study or a review is absolutely fine. And most often, if they're receiving value, most customers will be happy to do it. So I think the difficult part is if people have trouble with it, I think sometimes they ask too soon or they ask the wrong customers. And if the customer isn't happy or receiving value, they're not going to agree to that. A couple of other tactics that I've used in the past that work really well. Often companies will do periodic customer surveys. They'll ask send out a survey of questions to get customer feedback or kind of measure customer satisfaction or sentiment. I always like to include a question about whether they would be willing to be a reference or write a testimonial or participate in a case study. When you add that question, you'll actually get a lot of people that will raise their hand, and that gives you a pool of customers to reach out to when you need something like that. Okay. And then lastly, I think for any great customers that you have, if you're able to engage your CEO or other C-level executives and arrange a meeting with them and the customer, often having that ask come from a senior member of the team makes a customer feel very important and valued, and they're more likely to say yes. And one last thing I'll say is I am a big fan of customer advisory boards, of getting a group of customers together, even providing some type of incentive or compensation for their time, but where they can meet with you quarterly to provide product feedback, market feedback, answer questions, and often the people that are part of your advisory team are happy to be part of a case study or testimonial.
Okay. Yeah, that's I think like the NPS, like having a net promoter score where you say on a scale from 1 to 10 at like a lot of different things. For me, for example, I have an accelerator program, and now I ask at the end of each module like the same question, 1 to 10, like rank,
Hmm.
what's missing to get to 10, and it's always like, yeah, on a scale of 1 to 10, how likely would you be to recommend the post? And often people who are at 9, 10, then you can go engage. They're really happy. They give you really good testimonial feedback. Then they give you nice intros, and then the other one also give you like very good kind of things about what you need to improve. And so I think it's always like having this NPS for customers is great to kind of like get some good feedback on what to do.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. And now I remember the question I had, which is I'm gonna use my host privilege to bypass all the questions and ask a question for me. So on LinkedIn, I'm posting regularly. I'm pretty happy with the awareness I'm able to produce. And often people they come to me and they're like, "Oh, Thibaut, you're crushing it on LinkedIn, blah blah blah," and then they're like, "That's amazing," and then they believe I'm like living on a yacht and I have millions and everything. But the truth is, it's not like that. It's not as easy to monetize that. So, do you have a tip for when you're good at bringing awareness, but not so good at turning it into money? Like, what would be a good tip or a good like strategy there?
Yeah, so I think the important thing about leveraging the LinkedIn platform to ultimately drive new business to your company, I think it involves a couple of important factors. So, one, the content needs to be very consistently focused on what your business is offering. And so, um, making sure that you are being really consistent in developing new and interesting content that's related to that topic. Um, Using that content to show your expertise, to demonstrate value, to give away information for free is critical. So that's the first piece. The second is you need to make sure that the people that are most likely to buy your product or service are consuming the content. And so you have to invest heavily in a connection strategy on LinkedIn to make sure that your potential buyers are actually connected to you so they actually see the content that you're posting. A lot of people skip over this and they'll put out really great content, but their buyers aren't seeing it. Other people within their community are seeing it. They could be getting a lot of engagement, but if your potential buyers aren't seeing it, then it's missing the mark of what you're trying to do. And so whether you're using a tool like Sales Navigator or just connecting with people organically through the platform, you need to have a strategy and a consistent daily effort to send and accept connection requests to your potential buyers. So it's creating that great content that really resonates. It's making sure that the right people are seeing that content. And then it's consistency and time. It
Okay.
takes time to drive revenue through organic LinkedIn posting. I would say, that it probably takes 4 to 6 months of consistent posting. Doesn't have to be every single day, and building your following and your connections in order to create a reliable stream of inbound interest coming to your company. So I'd say, yeah, I think great content, making sure you have the right connections, and then the consistency are the top three.
That's beautiful because it's exactly like two core things of one accelerator program I'm doing is like proactively build your network with your ICP and serve problem-centric content to this network. But the problem I found for me is like often people are saying, "Hey, Thibaut, your content is amazing, blah blah blah." But how do you make money? Like they say, you never pitch. Like we don't know what you like. Like how can we buy stuff? And so my question, often is
Mm.
like, I found that I went into this other direction where I just give so much content, but I'm never asking for money for something in exchange. So you have any tip on that or?
Yeah. So the way I think about this is your LinkedIn profile should do the selling and your content should be valuable. And I think people do not take advantage of all of the areas of your LinkedIn profile to really clearly communicate what your company does. So you have the big banner at the top. You can use a tool like Canva to customize that. That's like your billboard, right? You should have very clearly what your company name is, what you do, your company website, as much, in other information there that you might have on your actual website homepage. Your headline is really critical real estate. It should talk more about what you do and the value you provide and not just your title. Your About Us section should not be about your career history, but should be about what your company does and what it offers and how that provides. Think about your recommendations and get current and former customers to provide you recommendations. Think about your featured section and include relevant content or resources so people can learn and find out more about your company. So I think number one would be really invest and make sure that your profile is clearly selling what you're doing. And because if you're putting out a ton of content and getting a lot of engagement, people will end up on your profile and people will see that. And then I think the second piece is I'm a huge believer in, giving more than you take. But I do believe that it is completely reasonable, if you're posting valuable content regularly, to have occasional posts that are more direct about the service that you provide or the product that you offer, leaning maybe a little bit more on the salesy side of things. And so as long as you don't overdo that, I think that is totally fine. But most people do not optimize their profile for selling. So that would be my core recommendation.
Okay, good. That's really, it's just marketing 101. Actually, it makes so much sense. You attract with content and you convert with your landing page, which is your LinkedIn profile, basically. So
Exactly.
it's so cool.
A lot of people don't do it though. It's nothing nothing is that complicated. It's the simple stuff, but it's doing the simple stuff really well. And for some reason, a lot of people don't do that.
Yeah, that's why we're in business. So we have other question here. So how do you identify upsell opportunities in customer success?
Oh, that's a great question. So I'll kind of start again with what I said for the testimonial question. I think you always need to make sure that your customer is happy and receiving valuable business outcomes with whatever current product or service that they're using before you consider any type of upsell. So you need to start at that baseline. Again, a lot of people will attempt to upsell things too early when the customer is not ready, and that is never a good idea. So always make sure that you're only considering targeting customers for upsell when they're happy and receiving value. Now, that said, depending upon your business, there could be interesting data points that can help surface which customers make sense to reach out to. Especially if you have a lot of customers, you might think, where do I even begin? And so it depends. This is highly business dependent, but all of the different companies that I've been at, there have been different indicators that have existed where you can sort of create a subset of your customer list as a potential for customers that may be ready for some type of upsell. So to, give you an example, when I was working at Grubhub Seamless and we were working with companies that were feeding their employees, it's very common that, like, for example, an accounting and consulting firm is going to be extra busy during tax season because their teams are working around the clock, they're working late, and that company might be using you for some ad hoc ordering, but because of their industry that there'll be periods of time that they're going to potentially, need more food, for example. So whether that's like the industry or the type of business, that's one way that could surface it. Another is a company that is growing. So typically, especially for SaaS products where there's, user licenses or things like that, let's say the company raises money or has some other growth milestone, that often means that they're going to continue to invest in hiring. And so, those types of company milestones can often indicate that something's happening. And then this gets very business dependent. So this will begin to be a little bit more vague, but different product utilization metrics. So depending on the company I've been at, you've been able to see, like, if someone is not really using your product, they're probably not a good target for upsell, and you need to focus first on adoption. If you have a customer that's using the product significantly on a regular basis, that's showing that they're getting a ton of value, and there's a possibility that they might be ready to take things to the next level and purchase an additional module, product, or service. So again, that will vary, but like really analyzing product usage and identifying people that you need to focus on for adoption and your power users, and reaching out to them.
Okay.
Additionally, surveying. And so, I've done a lot of surveying where, again, depending upon the business, you can use the survey to ask questions about whether a customer might have a particular pain point that a different product or service of yours could serve, and use that as a data collection point to then reach out and initiate a conversation. That said, I would say the old-fashioned way of just being really connected to your customer, understanding their business goals, how their business makes money, what's important to that person, is honestly the best way. Because if you're really connected with them, you're going to know when there's an opportunity to upsell or not. But the tactics that I had described previously is a way to think about doing it a little bit more systemically instead of customer by customer.
Okay. Nice triggers. Yeah, for me, upsell is one of the things I'm the least good at. Because I really love hunting. I don't know why, but like that's my thing.
Yeah.
And I'm always like, once it's signed, I'm like, I feel like a bit ashamed. You're like, they signed, let's hope they forgot about it, and then we can move on to the next contract. And I don't know why. It's just like maybe my education. I'm French, maybe that's why. But I'm not a huge fan of. I mean, I would love to do more upsells, but I always find it hard to go and say, hey, can you give me more money? Because I feel like they already gave me some. And so I think it's good to have these kind of really nice triggers. And in the end, if you make them more money, they will give you more money. So that's the thing.
Yeah, look for the win-win, the mutually beneficial. Yeah,
exactly. So we have like another 8 minutes going. So let me check. Any question you want to answer in the ones there? So we have like stuff about campaign. We talked about that already. There's one actually I think I like is you often get hundreds of likes on your posts. What's your secret?
On LinkedIn.
Yeah.
When I first started posting, I did not get a lot of likes. I started posting in the beginning of 2019, and I started posting weekly, and then over the course started posting a few times a week. And now I try to post every day. But some days I don't. I didn't post today. I wasn't inspired, so I didn't put any content out because I didn't have anything I felt really good about. But usually, most days I'll post, 5 to 6, 7 days a week these days. And so I think it's consistency. I think the one thing that people often don't realize is your day to day is chock full of interesting moments and experiences that you can get inspiration of for content. Most of my content is literally about things that have happened, the day before or the days preceding when I'm actually posting it. And so I find that that's really relevant because I've just experienced something or tried something and I'm writing my experience down. But I will say the consistency and the practice, it's a muscle that you need to build, and it doesn't happen overnight. And I think sometimes people can get discouraged if they start posting a few things and then don't get a ton of engagement. They might give up too early. But every single person on LinkedIn that has a lot of likes or followers, everyone started in the same position. And everybody had a period of time where they were building up into getting that. But that said, I try to have, like, my approach on LinkedIn is to be very real and authentic. I'm not afraid to share mistakes that I make. So it's not about, me being the best. It's about, I learned something from this and maybe someone else can benefit from this learning. And I'm a big believer in posting really actionable tips and takeaways. And I think that that type of content does well when people feel like oh, I could try this today. I could try that tomorrow. That's interesting to me. And definitely mixing it up with video and text it helps. You mentioned this at the beginning. people do enjoy video. It kind of makes you more human. Coming through on the platform. So those are a few things to consider. But honestly, anybody can do it if you just stick with it and stay consistent.
Yeah, I really, it's true. Like giving this valuable content, and I think you're really doing it really well. And also, sometimes people say, okay, for me, it's been a while I didn't put a video because often the engagement, the reach is way lower. But I think diversifying your the type of content you're posting out there is good because the algorithm changes all the time. And what is going to make you successful in the end is not the algorithm or it changes; it's consistent, great content.
Yeah.
And so one thing also is I've listened to, I think it was not the last one, but the one from beginning of October, where the last demand gen Q&A you did, and Chris was saying, okay, seems like the algorithm, the reach is down. Actually, every month everyone's complaining that it's down, and so the thing is now it's kind of more in favor of newcomers, which makes so much sense because LinkedIn wants more people to create content, so they stay and they serve more ads. So they give like kind of incentives to newcomers, and people who have been at it for a while, they see kind of sometimes a reduced reach. And I think like going through this how do you call that, the going through this phase where you were really going like crazy and then it's going down, that's when you see if people will stay or not. And for me, I've been committed. I say, okay, I'm going to post every single day of the week for 2020, no exception, no matter the time zone where I am I'm every day. You see sometimes it goes like crazy, but often you just see the numbers that keep going up and up and up, and your baseline is always more.
Yep.
I think it's really this consistency, this exercise, just like meditating every morning would be something similar where you post content if you can every day, but at least have developed an habit around that, basically.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, as I said, I think the next like 12 to 36 months on LinkedIn is sort of the most opportunistic window. People that haven't started yet that start today will see a benefit if they commit to it.
Yeah, exactly. Good. So I think we have 3 more minutes. So I just wanted to open up to if there's anything you want to say, a pitch or whatever, and let people know where they can get more of you, basically.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think really enjoyed the conversation today. I thought it was great questions. Thanks to everyone that is live on the session right now. I think I already talked about the company and what we're doing. I'm the only social platform I'm on is actually LinkedIn. I've never had a Facebook or Twitter or Instagram account. So that's where you can find me. You can find out more about our company at refinelabs.com. And I think that's all I got.
Okay, so I'll put the link to your LinkedIn profile and Refine Labs in the show notes. And thanks so much for coming, Megan. That was really insightful. And for me, I'm going to go and listen to your State of Demand Gen podcast.
Sounds good. No, it was great. Thank you so much for inviting me on. And I hope you have a great rest of the week.
Yeah, have a good day. Thank you.
Take care. Bye.